Thank you, Shauna, for that moving and inspiring opening. What a hard act to follow. As Shauna said so eloquently, we're in this amazing, exciting, and terrifying moment. And how we view it and navigate it individually and collectively will be key to how we confront and solve the climate emergency that's before us. My two guests are moving exactly on that path. Margaret Klein Salamon is Executive Director at the Climate Emergency Fund and author of Facing the Climate Emergency, How to Transform Yourself with Climate Truth. And Justin Winters is co-founder and executive director of One Earth and led the development of the global safety net, which we'll discuss in a minute. Welcome to you both. Margaret, let's start with you. As you note in your book, we're at this critical moment. We're isolated from one another. We feel competitive with just about everybody, even people we don't know. There's a sense of belonging to a community is fading for so many of us, and we simply don't trust one another. And yet you're calling for a coming together of unprecedented proportions to solve this emergency of unprecedented proportions. How are we going to do that?
Thanks so much. I'm so glad to be here. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and that's how I approach this question. What is going on with us? What is wrong with us that we are allowing carbon emissions to go up every year, even when we know that we're heading for catastrophe? What is this mass delusion, and how do we wake up and treat climate like the existential threat that it is? And as you said, the individualism in the United States particularly has really gotten out of hand. We're so focused on me, my career, my money, my house, my family, here's my little bubble, and that's all I can deal with. And the thing about the climate emergency is that's not going to work. We need to recognize that the plans that we might have had for our individual future are going to be horribly interrupted by the ongoing collapse of civilization induced by the climate. It's just not going to work the way we had hoped. So it's time for a new way, right? It's time for a new approach. And I think that our only hope is through a collective awakening in which more and more of us realize this, that the individual me first way leads only to disaster. And through a collective transformation, a social movement that forces policymakers to transform our economy at emergency speed, a collective effort to do so, that's our only hope.
Yeah, well, we've been on in this, we're all in this together mode around natural disasters and droughts and fires and everything else. Does it have to get worse before we're able to get there? Or do you think we can get there now?
More and more people are getting there every day. And that is what gives me hope, right? Any person can have their oh shit moment on climate, the moment where they realize that their plan for their life, what they thought they were doing, is not going to work because civilization is going to collapse if we continue on our present trajectory. And they say, okay, well, that the way I was going is a dead end, and I'm gonna go a different way. So yeah, it's happening. It is absolutely happening. It's too slow. It's not big enough, but so our job is to just accelerate everything, keep pushing, keep talking about the climate emergency, keep feeling our feelings about the climate emergency, and engaging in activism, demanding political change. That's what the Climate Emergency Fund is dedicated to, by the way. We fund activists.
And part of that activism and part of that change comes from some of the solution sets that we're talking about here this week at Verge. And I'm wondering, Justin, the technical or the technology part of this, you headed up an initiative called the Global Safety Net. It's called the first comprehensive global scale analysis of land masses essential for biodiversity and climate resilience. First of all, can you tease that apart a little bit? Ed, but what did you learn about our ability to solve some of these challenging issues?
Thanks so much, Joel. Yeah, it really came out of this research, and it wasn't just the research around the global safety net. There are several streams of big research that we were helping to spearhead, to fund, to be a part of kind of putting together. It really came out of this top line question: can we solve the climate crisis? What's the limit? What do we need to do? And do we have the solutions? And what we found through first, the climate model that we invested in, that was led by some of the leading climate experts in the world, and came out in 2019, is that yes, we can actually solve the climate crisis with existing solutions today. We can limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees C, and we can get it even lower. And we can do that with existing technologies and nature-based climate solutions. Essentially, we need to transition to 100% renewable energy. The second piece, which is part of the global safety net, which I'll share more about in a moment, is that we need to protect, restore, and connect 50% of the world's lands and oceans. And then the third piece is really transitioning farmers and communities to regenerative agriculture, so that we know that it is possible to do this. That second piece, which is often overlooked because most people are really focused on technology-driven solutions, is the solution that resides in nature. And so the global safety net was the first comprehensive analysis of how much of our lands, we haven't gotten to the oceans yet, that's an even bigger project, but how much of our lands we need to protect and restore, both to prevent biodiversity loss, to stop biodiversity loss, and solve the climate crisis. So these crises are intertwined. People don't understand that. And what came out of that is that writ large, globally, we need to protect and restore roughly 50%. Every region, every country is different. Every region, every country has a vastly different set of intact lands, vastly different set of biodiversity. And we need to respect and honor this great diversity, and then look at the roadmap of nature that's so critical and so exciting, actually, to invite people in to protect and restore, to do that as one global community. So top line, I think the most important thing to acknowledge is that we can do this. It's possible. The only thing standing in our way is actually us.
Yeah, well, knowledge is power, but give us a little snippet about how the global safety net, how this data that you've created and this mapping that you've created actually enables entrepreneurs, regulators, governments, politicians, corporations to do something that they may not have been able to do, at least as easily before.
Well, and just to note, this is the very first version of the global safety net. This was an extremely difficult analysis to put together. And we're already in the works and doing a much higher resolution, much more actionable tool around the global safety net. But we built, in partnership with Google Earth, we built an app called globalsafetynet.app. You can visit that and you can look at the interactive tool that's on there to zoom in and zoom out and understand in your region, in your country, what is the roadmap of nature, of lands, intact lands that we need to protect and restore here. And I encourage everybody to kind of explore this, because we went to great effort to not just produce a scientific paper, but actually make an actionable tool that can really inform, guide, and inspire and mobilize ambition with a lot of the decision makers that need to be much more ambitious in their climate solutions.
Yeah. Your region, your country, but also your supply chain is certainly a way to look at this. Both of you have been involved and have founded and funded and launched so many things, it's even hard to know where to turn, but both of you have been advocating for a new role for philanthropy. Talk a little bit about that, Margaret, first of all, and particularly the funding for women change makers that you've been advocating for.
There is a new movement that is popping up more and more. And it is distinct from the gradualist, big green approach that has dominated environmentalism for decades. These are young, ultra ambitious organizations who know that we need nothing less than to transform our policy, our energy system, our agricultural system, our land use. And so the Climate Emergency Fund invests in this new movement. And doing so, it contains so many opportunities for breakthroughs and rapid change, which is exactly what we need. But it also brings certain challenges that investing philanthropically in established, professionalized institutions does not take. So these movements, in 2019, the Sunrise Movement, Extinction Rebellion, and the school strikers were all less than 2 years old when they really came together to transform the climate conversation globally. So at the Climate Emergency Fund, we're asking all the time, where is the next breakthrough coming from? Who is on the leading edge? Who is on the vanguard of activism, of thought leadership that supports activists? Who is creating movement infrastructure for these new movements? Because we believe that the movements that are going to protect humanity in the living world are still being born. And so we want to help them achieve their full potential.
Yeah. Justin, do you see these as primarily young millennials and Gen Z entrepreneurs and founders, or are you seeing this across at least the age spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The youth movement has injected new energy, new demands, and a much bigger sense of kind of vibrancy around the climate emergency. But in my experience over the past 15 years, funding grassroots movements around the world dedicated to climate and environment, there are millions of people that hold the solutions in their communities, on their lands, in their waters. And they are incredible. They're the unseen. They are the change makers that here at One Earth, we are dedicated to radically scaling up the amount of philanthropic capital that is going to these solutionists on the ground. Very few people really know this stat, though it's getting a lot more airtime these days. Less than 2% of all global philanthropic dollars go to climate and environment. And in fact, I think it's even lower. And just a quarter of that actually reaches efforts on the ground that are so critical to solving this. And 0.2% actually goes to women-led environmental efforts, even though we know that they're often the best protectors of the earth. So there is a huge opportunity, I think, here if we're able to change this paradigm and flip that stat and actually get the resources to the incredible network of change makers around the world that are so critical to solving this.
Yeah. So in the 3 minutes or so that we have left, as we begin these 4 days of learning and sharing and connecting, what's your ask of the Verge community, a virtual room full of change makers in and of themselves in this moment? Margaret, start with you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a tough one, and I want to recommend a couple of steps depending on where you're at right now. The first is to talk about the climate emergency and how you feel about it. Some people have never had that kind of conversation, and it's really critical to fully integrating this emergency into your life and work. If people are interested, we have a free conversation open to anyone at climateawakening.org. So you can call in and join people from all over the world talking, sharing your feelings about the climate emergency. So that's step one, talk about your feelings. Step two, and I am jumping ahead a little bit, but I think it's important, consider dedicating your life to this cause. And I know that sounds like, whoa, that's like a crazy ask, but it's only, it's not crazy in proportion to the scale of the crisis. It's totally reasonable given the extremity that we're in. Yeah. And I know that the Verge audience is incredibly capable and influential group of people. So I hope that you'll consider it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in this room actually have dedicated their lives to this. Justin, how about you?
I guess, I would ask people to ask themselves how they can be of service of something greater than themselves. How can they show up to be part of this collective movement and moment and opportunity to really drive transformation of how we live here on Earth and how we live together. And then secondly, I would encourage everybody to visit our website and check out the One Earth Navigator and explore and understand the bioregion, your place on Earth where you live, that you call home, as an opportunity to learn about your region, the place that you live on, and the nature that's just underneath of your feet. And at the same time, also give yourself a shot at exploring all the incredible projects that we have up on the website that are opportunities for you to directly support. So these are grassroots leaders, many of them indigenous, many of them women, that are leading the way forward.
Yeah, great. So it's not just do your job, it's do the job that needs to be done. Margaret, Klein, Salamon from the Climate Emergency Fund, Justin Winters from One Earth and the Global Safety Net. Thank you both so much and love the work you're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.